Our camera. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 6th meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. Please take note of exits around the room and now join us as we salute the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a new application. NICHOLS Oxygen Property located at 5 St. Andrews Road. The applicants are proposing adding some new uses to the site, primarily car sales, car work. And let me turn it over to you, Mr. Tierums, to make your presentation.
Public hearing.
Does everybody have, I don't have a board for there.
That's okay. We'll have our
Up here.
plans.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Nichols has his existing property on Route 9G. He's been there a long time business owner in Hyde Park and resident. And he wants to change the use and bringing some different businesses into the existing buildings that are on the property. And he really only, we're not proposing any additional paved or impervious surfaces. The only additional area is to more formalize his equipment storage on the site, which has been going on for some time now. But we'd like to make some sort of gravel parking lot towards, we'll call it the rear of the usable section of the property that
Before
they
it
own.
climbs so steeply back up.
Yes. And so we're in front of you just for site plan approval for his proposed uses.
So first, Mr. Tierums, it looks as though that he can get the increase that he's seeking, but the scale, you need to calculate the percentage so we know what the maximum is. I remember it's 50% expansion of a non-conforming size during a neighborhood business district. And you have it so that you have it lined up in a formula right here showing that it's less than what's allowed, but you still need to show, just show us the percentage to calculate it. Second, there's just a little inconsistency on the map. It says existing one-story building, but it's also labeled as a two-story building. If you look, I think it's just a really
Okay.
tall building.
It is one story.
I think it's one story, okay.
I probably had it in 3 different spots and only changed it in 2, so.
Just
okay.
make sure that they both match.
Yep.
I had some questions about the proposed equipment storage area. Is that going to stay a loop road, or are you just going to, I mean, it's surrounded by
No, we
boulders
will-
now on 3 sides.
We will remove, any gravel towards the back, but it'll have the area where you can pull in and out of either side of it.
Okay.
Just keep the gravel drive around there. Just for, most of the equipment in there is trucks, like for local tree clearing or such operations that come through town here. And it just, I think it'll give better movement through the area.
Sure, I just want to make sure that there's adequate movement for you guys. Then there's no new sign proposed. At some point, you want to propose a sign for the new business or to go on the existing location?
We did, it's
Oh.
in your packet. You just haven't-
Oh, I'm sorry, this was in today's mail, so to
Brought it over
speak?
yesterday, so.
Thank you, okay, then I'll take a look. If you would-
Same sign, and I had, we imposed what Ulrich, the people that want to lease it, and the dimensions and everything.
Do you want to light the
There's
sign?
kind of a picture that we made up of it.
Aha. So, is it going to go on the same location as the existing sign now?
It's the same sign.
Oh.
If you look at it, it's one new panel on the bottom.
On the bottom, it's blank now, we're putting on, there you go.
My apologies, sorry. So the sign's not lit right now. Do you want to propose any lighting to the sign?
No lights.
Okay. Just want to make sure that we do it as we go. And this is presented as a sign permit, but you're doing this as part of site plan, correct? So
Correct.
there's no additional fee. And I think the rest of, the only other comments I have were about some parking. I believe those are in Liz's memo, so I'll turn it over to her. Ms. Axelson, comments?
So Pete and I and our new planner Megan sat around a table, and one of the first things that popped up was that there's this kind of Y-shaped double driveway. It looks like both driveways it's like two driveways going out to 9G that appear to be 25 feet or more wide.
They've been that way since beginning of time.
Right.
And that was the state, what the state approved at the time we built the place back in '76.
Right.
Well, they're gonna go circulate, I think, to the, the state, so the state will take a look at it.
Okay, all right. Well, our recommendation is to delete the northern one, keep the other one, because you have a spot up front where it's a little tight for parking, where you have your used car lot. And if you close off the northern of the two, you could put couple parking spaces there, and all the parking that you have in front of the first buildings.
He's really not looking to do a lot of construction on this site. It's really, these are existing buildings that have had existing businesses over the last 40 years, and he's really just looking to
Well,
get
your
an official
layout
change of
doesn't work,
use.
that's the problem. Your layout, your parking layout in front of buildings, what's labeled A1 and A2 doesn't, work, so you're gonna have to find like a home for those parking spaces, because people can't like access around there. There's no drive aisle or anything between there and where you've got, the used.
They go get a state
Cars.
the highway and everything, could be some,
I think we
Well,
will.
the state,
I
the
think-
issue with, as far as the driveways, I believe one of the things that we're gonna do tonight is it's gonna end up going to the state and to the Dutchess County, Department of Health. If the state says, we don't care, then that's fine. So,
state approved it when we built it.
right.
But
What
then,
happens is, they have said anytime that you have a change of use on a site, that they would at least like to see it, just as like a courtesy, and if they decide it's fine, then it's fine. If they say, look, we have issues, then they have issues, so we kinda leave it up to them. They're the ones that asked, the planning board, that whenever you have a change of use on a property, that they at least be sent a plan, even if it has existing driveways, just as a courtesy, so.
Can I just make a quick point? It would not be code compliant if we move parking to the front line of the building. If they close this off, this wouldn't be a good area for parking to comply with our code.
well, that,
Parking's supposed to be to the rear of the front line of the building. And I think what you're talking about is it's tight between the parking spaces labeled A1, 2, 3, and 4,
Yeah,
for
right.
A1 and 2 to back
Yeah,
up and
if-
out.
Yeah,
And
you can't, maneuver there.
the thing is, yes, you can't maneuver there where the used cars are, and there is plenty of space further back. There's a.
Well, I think.
Can I just,
But I think we are, read your comments on the moving around the parking, and we'll look into that. And I don't think you have bad ideas on moving around the parking and providing, better flow through the area. I think Mr. Nichols is just really opposed to, hopefully the state doesn't want him to change the entrance. But the parking and the flow and some of the room there between in front of the building and the used car sales, we can move that around to address your comments.
yeah, I guess the point I was gonna say is you already have paved areas, we're not asking you to dig up more earth and repave or anything like that. It's just, there is one row towards the back of that cluster of buildings, A1 through A3. There's a row of parking sort of facing 9G. On the flip side of that, you could easily fit in another row of parking because you've got 40 to 50 feet of whatever paved or gravel area that could definitely accommodate another row of parking plus plenty of turnaround space near the buildings that are there.
Go back there.
The trailer,
That's basically,
you're talking about
employee parking.
parking spaces 1 through 8 and 1 through 7, I think.
yeah,
In front of A4 and A5?
so, yeah. If you were to take the 4 spaces that you now have in front of A1 through A3, and the ones that you have to the west of your used car parking lot, you could easily accommodate those 6 spaces on the east side
Like a double
of
row.
your parking row that's 1 through 8.
Yeah, we have room there.
You
Yeah.
definitely do. And then you'll have plenty of turnaround space there, so then you'll have plenty of maneuverability in front of buildings A1 through A3. Yep, and these. Yep. Yeah, the 2 little ones plus the 4, and move those over there.
1, 2, 3, 4, move over there.
Yep.
Because the only thing we have is we get the propane tanks, the trucks have to back up in there and so forth.
Right,
That-
and And I suppose if you need, if
It
you,
probably looks better.
right, if you need a handicap parking space somewhere, probably closer, maybe one of the ones in the row near building A3, maybe one of those could be,
Yeah, Paul, you need to
Handicap
label
parking
some
space.
ADA spots.
Yes.
yep. But you do have plenty of room there,
Yeah,
so,
we need it.
yeah,
Right now, the snow pile is up to here.
right, right, right.
It's a bad winter, you know.
And most of the other comments have to do with clarification, kind of putting a zoning table together that puts everything in one place.
Okay.
I know you have some scale calculations, you know.
Yeah, they're just
Put
showing
it all.
numbers rather than percentages.
So just for Paul's notes, what's the minimum width you need between two between two parking aisles in order to be maneuverable?
24
22,
feet?
well, 24, it could go a little down, but I mean, 24 is like the norm.
Mhm.
And if you've got 40 feet and you take away 18, you still have plenty of room there. And then the other end, closer to A4 and A5, is, there's closer to 50 feet there, so. Based on scaling it. It looks like it's a 50 scale plan. It wasn't clear from the graphic. That was all. But I'm pretty sure it's a 50 scale. 1 inch equals 50 scale.
Yes.
Yep. So you would have room there to put another row of 18-foot-long spaces backing.
No, that's a very good idea.
Only
I
graphic
think we'll,
scales.
Work out better.
I know that, that's one of our
That's what we're here for, right?
I'll fix the graphic.
That's all right.
And, let's see. I don't know what you have in mind for lighting.
Said none.
None.
None, okay. You mean on the, I thought they were talking about the signs
We
before.
have
You mean,
lighting on the side of the buildings now, it's always been there.
Okay.
And there's no lighting on the sign. So basically ours, we have some security lighting, which is on the
Yeah, wall
building
packs.
station now.
Yep.
We have one light that comes off the top of the sign that goes to the flagpole, okay? And that's been there forever. We gotta light the flag, so.
so if you could,
Easy switch.
yeah, show that, whatever you have existing that you're gonna keep to be retained.
But I wasn't planning to put pole lights up, I wanna keep the lighting down.
Right.
Because we don't need it at night.
The reason,
Security.
the reason we were suggesting the lighting is because when it gets dark in the winter, it gets dark sometimes at 4 o'clock, and the car sales might still be open. So they don't close till
Enough
5.
lighting off the front of the building that would
Okay,
light that area.
good.
Never
We're
had
ju-
any problem with.
We're just trying to anticipate issues, that's
Yeah,
all for you.
Well,
understand.
we'll need to see existing lighting, and I know in the past Tad sometimes, you know, wants to take a look. So whatever is existing, the mounting height, et cetera. I know it's not new, but to show where you do have it now,
Okay.
and what type it is, what height is it mounted, that kind of thing.
You said it,
They don't show elevations. All the lighting, I believe, all the lighting's on the building, right?
Correct.
it's on the building.
So they don't show, the elevations were not submitted because they're not proposing changes, so
I'm not looking for elevations, I'm looking for,
a
you
little
know,
symbol for where a
it
light is?
shows a symbol for
Okay.
a wall-mounted piece.
We'll find a way to clearly
There's
depict that.
Two on the side and one in the back, that's all it really is. But they're, the new LED lightings, Central Hudson put in.
And then your EAF refers to an existing drainage system, so if you can show whatever,
When, in, the really drainage system only complies of sheet flow off the pavement into, you know, grass areas, whether it's in back of the buildings or between NICHOLS property and the salvage yard.
Everything kind of tapers to the back.
So there really isn't, it's basically
There's no drainage.
sheet flows and goes onto, the grass area, so there's no,
so what do you want
Catch
to
me.
see?
Worked for years.
I mean, it's existing, I mean, it has, I've never, in all my years, I've never received any issues from the neighbors, and being the next door property is, used car, junk car.
Salvage.
Salvage yard, excuse me, thank you for
Okay.
correcting.
The one thing, you have access for firefighting should be designated and labeled.
Well, we just wanna make sure, and I'm sure, Ray's got a little, experience in this, but, I mean, are we assuming that we're referring this to the fire department, right?
We are.
So just-
Courtesy. They always want to know if there's a new use going in.
you know,
And
so-
it's gonna change when they have the car sales area, that'll change, I believe, their access. So-
We were concerned that if you're eliminating this turnaround at the end of the lot, when a fire truck comes in, where's it, you know? One of the questions was if the fire truck is coming in, but you eliminate the turnaround, where are they gonna turn around to get out?
The loop in the back.
Well, they don't, they can turn around there, they're on the road, they can turn around in this area. There's gonna be area there.
If you've been back to the site, there's enormous open areas throughout the whole length of this site. Room for fire
Right,
trucks
well,
and
we're gonna, I mean,
maneuvering.
what we typically do is, you know, we send it to the, you know, the fire department.
Yeah.
I would suggest that, excuse me, that we get the plan updated with the revised, you know, parking spaces, so they can see they have some access in front of, you know, A1 and A2. And then when we get that updated, then we can send it off, right? I mean, we don't
I
wanna
agree,
send
no,
them
no,
something
no, I
that's a
agree.
problem.
We have a resolution to type the action and refer it, but we'll wait until we have an updated set of plans to refer it, because it has to go to county as well.
Is the loop in the back is that area with the boulders around it gonna be graded at all, or is it just as is?
It's flat right now.
Okay,
If you look at the contours back there, you know, they're very far apart. It's generally flat in that whole section, so there's really not any necessary grading of earth.
Yeah, it's all, we've been parking trucks and stuff back there now. We have a tree guy that actually lives next to the supervisor's house, and he parks his equipment over there. So,
Any
Do-
other comments?
The one comment you had is label trees and wooded areas. In general, this does show all the trees and wooded areas within the property that we're affecting. I mean, there's woods way to the back as this property goes back for 21 acres. But the individual trees shown on here are the extent of the trees on the site.
so that back part past the boulders is all cleared?
It's cleared to a point to,
Probably the thing goes up 300 feet, there's no,
Right.
people don't see the
Yeah,
coyotes and.
no, that's
turkeys.
fine, we don't need to see anything over there. You know, if you say that all of the trees
All this
are
is-
shown, then that's
Yeah,
fine.
this, all trees go down through here, and there's also a chain link fence. The trees are owned by basically.
Right. The
almost
salvage yard owns the
salvage
trees
all
and the
trees.
fence.
And he has a 10-foot fence that he has through there to keep people out.
And then this area is all clear?
It's all clear now, yeah, it's all fenced there. There's a tree by the house here, and there's.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bunch of trees shown on here, yeah, that's,
And they're
We're
big
good.
trees.
All right. Well, I know I sent the memo that I wrote, I sent it in Word, so Paul knows what to do with it. He'll give us some replies.
I don't care what else.
Oh, okay, that's fine, that's fine.
My hair day broke the
Liz,
other day.
Did you confirm that these spaces are the right size for used car sales?
I'm pretty sure Megan checked that, but I will. I measured them,
checked
I
it.
believe they're
But if it's
they're
scale,
8 feet wide by,
The fence height?
no.
the parking spaces
The
for the
parking
used cars.
spaces for cars, how big are they?
8 by 20.
they
Yeah.
have to have an additional 2 feet
Well,
because of the code, the way it's written about
but the
car
normal
sales.
car is 5 to 6 feet wide,
Yep.
so I made them all, the space is all 8 feet wide, figuring that provides the 2 foot between all cars.
I'll double check, but
Okay.
when I looked at it, it reminded me of the one we did on Route 9. So I'll double check.
Comments, Ms. Polidoro?
No additional comments.
And no other comments from the consultants? Mr. Pickett, comments?
Glad to see a new use going in, and otherwise no comment.
Ms. Dexter?
I echo that I'd like to see that you've got some good ideas here to revitalize the lot. I think the one thing I think might be missing is snow storage. You need to mark that on the site plan. Snow storage
I
area, so
think-
when it does snow,
Just
We need-
indicate an area.
It goes into the parking lot, basically.
right, but
And
that's,
up on there's a lawn between the parking lot going that way, and it's about 30 feet, and we push it up as far as.
yeah,
we
it just needs to be noted on there because it
Yeah.
kind of becomes a structure during
can.
winter.
And then we also push it towards the junkyard.
Yep, it just needs to be noted on the site.
This year, we've lost 30 feet, but it's an oddball year. When it gets more than that, then we haul it away. We haul it to the back.
Yep, it just needs to be noted on the site,
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay, we can add that.
Mr. Oliver?
No additional comments, and I agree with my colleagues. Glad to see a new use going in and utilizing some existing buildings in Hyde Park. Thank you.
I'm gonna bring
Ms.
that.
DiNapoli?
They like the site plan.
Like a lot.
They like the site plan and
Oh,
and
good.
new business to the Hyde
Yeah,
Park.
it is new business. We're trying to keep it going. Eventually, we're gonna sell it, okay, me, but, we have a renter for the front, as you see by the sign, and, he's anxious to get in, and then we also have to work with the DMV, because all this gets mixed together, and they have rules too. And in the back, we will be renting out, and then in that little storage area, we've been renting or actually been loaning it out to people like tree cutters and so forth. And then during the summer here, or during fall, we had Jago Tree Company that had like 50 trucks that
Yep.
were doing all the tree cutting, and
Yep.
they used it, and we didn't even charge, we just helped them out. It was-
So once you
it's a
sell,
nice property for, nice place to store stuff that people don't see.
so once you sell, what are you planning on doing? You sure you're not gonna be
Take care of my
bored?
kid, take care of my grandson.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Yes.
For you. With regards to the used cars parking, if it normally requires 2 additional feet around, is there a reason why that's not being asked for now, or?
It's shown as
Oh, it
8,
is shown.
each one is shown as 8 foot wide by 20,
So
so
that includes,
that would add 2 feet on each
Thank
side.
you.
It's just to allow people to walk around and examine them.
okay. By the used car area, since that's going to be new, is there going to be sufficient lighting down on these cars?
I think,
Because the reason I'm questioning, let me just
Yeah.
tell you why. Because I know other used cars places have come before us and they want additional lighting because they
Right.
fear for safety reasons.
Security.
Security.
I mean, we can
I mean, that's up to you.
lay it out, but
It's
I
up to
mean, at this point,
That's up
no.
to you.
talked to the
That's-
operator?
It's really a question.
Up to the operator, it's not.
we will, yeah, I mean, we can have a discussion with the operator and see what they say, and if that is a concern of theirs, then we should add it to this site
Yeah,
plan.
okay.
That's a good point.
I have another comment. In this district, I believe street trees are required, and so the board should discuss whether.
That's
the-
actually, that's my final request, is to add a street tree up front to soften the area.
On 9G, yes, and that was going to be my last.
Ah,
That along 9G, there should be
at least a
a
tree.
street tree.
What?
A tree.
We want to add a tree out by the street, a nice street tree.
Out front?
Yes.
To soften the area, there's nothing, it's just grass, sign, flagpole, that's it. So you're removing a tree back in it's a twin maple to be removed back where there's, toward the east or the rear of the property, I think it's A8. You have a tree shown to be removed, so
Yes.
to compensate, we'd like to see a tree planted. It can even be the same kind of maple or something, October Glory.
Is that what we're talking about? Yeah, it's a tree, right?
Okay, because I did have the question with, one of Liz's comments was the need for landscaping around the proposed parking area in the back. And our idea was that we were going to leave that as is. I mean, there's grass and field-like area that's been there.
Because it's an enclosure.
We weren't going to
You mean this? The
propose any
tended?
area?
landscaping back there.
Is it tended to? Like, is it mowed or not mowed? Is it?
Well, right now, it's more of a loop, and there's some things parked there, so it gets matted down. I think that's why we're gonna put the gravel lot in there, just make it
Just to
more formal.
delineate it, so, kind of keeps it under control.
The idea was there were gonna be a bunch of vehicles parked back there.
Right.
While I understand that on the south side, it's an existing, salvage yard. To the north, there are businesses in front, but there's some uses in back, and the idea was to at least try to create some kind of a screen. Not like a solid
Trees along that property line.
on your property.
North?
Right on the line, probably us and Julian's, you know. And we can mark that down.
Yeah, that would be good. Mark them on.
And even
But
consider-
on the adjoining property, it's not on your,
It's right on the line,
okay.
like the junkyard.
Well,
That
who
would be
owns
helpful.
it?
They're right
That
on
was
the
one of
line.
the reasons we were alluding
Yeah.
to existing,
Yeah, they're
Existing-
tall trees are, like the birch trees and maple trees, and pine trees, a little of everything along there.
I don't know
Naturally.
if anybody, Liz, or somebody could just drive in there and take a look at it, and you really are
I'd like to do something.
hidden from all properties in all directions from back there.
He needs to show like
There is landscaping,
trees.
there really is nothing on either side, and
So here's two things. First, I want to remind everyone, there's no screening required because these are commercial uses on either side. Screening is only required between residential and non-residential uses. So the screening is one issue that is kind of moot. The other is that it's the code in 108-4.5B, let me go through here, I. Any off-street parking for 17 or more vehicles shall provide curb planting islands or beds within the parking area, equal in total area to 15% of the total square footage of all stalls and aisles. But the difference here is they're not changing anything.
Right.
I was gonna say,
they're-
we didn't bring that up because there are rows of parking, and then there will be an area that has a tree in the middle of it. So
That's
that
what-
didn't seem appropriate
And that's
to
what I mean,
raise.
if they were changing the parking, but this already exists.
Okay, looking at the rear of the property to the north, I understand there are businesses to the front. I don't know that there's any prohibition that there would ever be a residential use in the back part. The back part is a little open, it isn't utilized, and that's the way I was thinking. But that's fine if the board doesn't want that.
Where does the
But I
zoning
think it's
district line
zoned
go?
neighborhood business
This
district.
is NBD, Neighborhood Business District.
Even to the north or at Gervargis? Because I know the line
Julian's.
goes through the property.
So
and
the
then-
adjacent property, I believe, is still NBD.
Yes.
And I did find the standard for the used car parking spaces. It doesn't give a dimensional requirement, but just jot this down, Paul. It's in section 108-27. Take a look at that whole section, but it's 108-27.2. C, which basically talks about each used car lot shall accommodate no more than one used car per 400 square feet of property, which I think you're fine in that. And there shall be no less than 2 feet between each car. And I
And I-
remember that on the site plan for the one that's on Route 9, they had actually shown the used car lot space with lines showing the 2-foot margin between each car.
Oh, okay.
That's how they did it on that one.
Is this Mr.
If I'm-
Neshawatz at the,
No, I
Right.
think
Mike's.
Mike's.
And actually, I don't know if it would be worth it to take a look at Mike's and see how they showed that on the plan. I mean, you've got plenty of room there. I don't see that there would be an issue.
well, can we just label the size of each of the parking spaces in there?
Well, I think
I mean-
what she's saying is you're taking what would be the normal size, and then you're showing the delineation. Here's the extra that we're giving per.
you mean drawing smaller lines to show
You
the
want me
2
drawing
feet?
cars in
Is
every
that what
parking
you're,
spot?
is that what you're asking for, Liz?
I'm pretty sure that's the way we did it on Mike's.
It
Maybe we
is.
could take a look at that.
It
Yeah.
seems excessive if your standard size cars are pretty standard, and that's why we made them the size you did, to have enough room for 2 feet.
Are you
beyond
striping
everyone.
the lot with those
Yes.
spaces?
Oh, the used car lot?
So should we be clear either way?
We are only doing the edge line, not inside the used car, but we can add that. When the striper's there, it's not a huge undertaking
So
to add
the
that.
board should decide, because they're showing it, but the board should decide whether that should be striped for enforcement purposes.
Maybe we should take a look at what happened on Mike's. I mean, would it be possible to pull that site plan?
Mhm.
And actually, if it's okay with the board, if I have that, as a PDF. I could always forward that
Of course.
to Paul.
Yep.
That's not gonna
Maybe
work.
that would
I
be
mean,
helpful.
whole outdoor equipment area. Right?
So I have a couple of concluding comments myself before we go to the resolution to refer this. First, thank you for saying you'll add the tree up in the front, because I think it'll soften the appearance. Second, Paul, it wasn't clear to me whether you added the new, I guess I'll call them sales stalls, where the cars will be, the 40 by 80. You added that into your calculation of scale? It's supposed to be, because it's now used instead
Yes,
of
I
just
did.
open? Okay. And then,
I'll double check that, but I'm 90% sure it's in there.
last but not least, we want to, oh, there it is, okay. When you said parking space, I used to think of that as sales space. And that says 21, but there's not 21 there, there's an even number.
Yeah,
So,
and it says 9 by 18.
yeah, so where did you calculate the sales
22.
stalls?
I don't
On
have
there.
that document in front of me. Is
No,
there
I'm
something
sorry.
40 by 80 that's 3,200 square feet?
Right, and on here it's 3,402 gross square feet, and it says 21 spaces.
Right.
Well, that's parking, but that's,
Right. And
Building
when I'm
one
looking
parking.
at this, there's no 3,200 that I'm seeing, in other
okay,
words.
I'll review that.
Thank you. And then last but not least, we'll probably ask for a note to be added saying no outside storage of parts, unless they're enclosed, as a proposed enclosure, because we're not supposed to allow outside storage. And sometimes that seems to creep up. That's what happened with Mike's as well. Over the years, there was more and more outside storage. Yeah, yeah, just for the just for that portion.
Area in the back.
And then last, sidewalks are required in all business districts between uses. So I want to just make the board consider this, but more importantly, it's been our policy in these small neighborhood business districts that are out on 9 and 9G that are way out where the speed limit is 55.
Yeah, we looked at
It's been our
that.
policy not to require sidewalks. That's the
Megan and
only
I kind of
time.
looked at what was nearby, and, you know, there's a school there, maybe kids are crossing the road to go to the deli, but,
We
you
don't
know,
really
we
want to
looked up
encourage
and
the kids
down
to,
and
we don't want to
just-
encourage them to cross. That's
didn't seem
the speed,
appropriate.
the design speed right into there really is 55, which means people go 60 or 65.
Well,
So,
it's 45 through there.
is it,
Yep.
gee, they don't observe 45. I went over
Nope.
there and
Design speed
watched.
probably is 55, but speed limit is 45.
Yes.
People are zooming by in that area.
Yep.
They all do 65.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, the only light is the one at the high school that's nearby. So I visited this site already. I did it without permission, sorry. So I've seen how open the area is, and it's totally flat, actually. It looks like it's totally flat. I didn't think you need to do any grading. So we're going to type the action, as well as refer, but only once you make some changes that you do. So do we need to change any of the wording on that, Victoria, to say?
Yes. Let's see. So you need to change it, numbers 2 and 3. Just add, once the revised submission is received, so that it's,
Once
the end of
revised
2 and 3,
submission is
yeah, just add
received.
once revised submission is received.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's got
Once the revised what?
Submission is received. Same line to both 2 and 3.
Comma, once the revised submission is received.
And is it okay if we do, I drive by there almost every day. Can I pull in and just take a look at the lot?
Anytime you want. If you want to call me, I'll meet you there.
Great, okay.
So,
Thank you.
once we get the revised submission, it has to go out for a mandatory 30-day referral process, where it goes to the county planning, and it goes to the fire department and DOT. So depending on how long it takes Paul to make these changes, I don't think the board should put this on until at least,
April 3rd?
May, or second meeting of April, but
Oh,
It's the first meeting in
second meeting
March.
of April would be
Right.
the.
April 17th. Today is March the,
6th?
how fast can you turn it around?
These are relatively simple changes, so I would like to get this in by end of next week, back to you guys.
Just remember, if we open a public hearing and we haven't heard back, we have to continue it. So
so
escrow
second-
charges, I'm just saying, if we're trying to hold your costs down, then we should probably do it. How fast are they trying to get in? Yesterday?
Yesterday.
I mean, none of these are major changes to the plans, so.
I'm
you
happy,
know,
I'm happy
I
to
think we
do.
could get this back to you fully submitted by next Friday,
So the 20th.
By, you mean next Friday or this Friday?
next Friday.
Okay, so then we should probably do it April 17th. 'cause
Right,
that'll
that's
give them,
30 days.
otherwise, I'm not sure we're going to hear much public comment on this, but we are required to do it. So we do it April 17th. If we've heard from everybody, we could consider opening and closing depending on the revisions that you've done.
Okay.
Because you've got to add a tree too. That's right. There's a few other changes besides just the parking you have to do. So, Chris, you have this resolution?
No, I
Oh,
do.
Diane does, sorry.
And he can always reach
It's
out
still
to
tight,
Liz,
I
right,
know.
if he wants to just make sure he's,
I mean, if you get
Has
them
the
in,
right
That's still
changes.
gonna be tight. I mean, if you can get them in earlier than that, because
better.
next Friday is the 15th, so if they don't, I mean, they're not gonna, like, go out on the 15th, they go out on the 18th or the 19th, they have 30 days.
Okay.
It's not even gonna be.
Can you aim for next Wednesday, Paul?
17th.
We'll aim for Wednesday.
Okay.
Sounds like a good plan.
Thank you for checking the calendar. That's correct. Okay.
We're ready?
Yeah.
Resolution classifying the action and referring the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, New York State Department of Transportation, Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health, and Roosevelt Fire District. Whereas 9 times, then therefore be resolved that the planning board hereby, 1, classifies the project as a type 2 action under seeker, and 2, directs its secretary to refer the project to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to section 239-M of the General Municipal Law once the revised submission has been received. And number 3, directs its secretary to refer the project to the New York State Department of Transportation, Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health, and Roosevelt Fire District for report and recommendation thereon, once the revised submission has been received.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. May I get a motion to set the public hearing for April 17th?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, sir.
The sign layout, is that all to be approved tonight, or is that?
It's part of
Part of
your
the
site
site
plan, so it's all approved at one, all together.
Okay.
If we approved it tonight, you'd have to pay $150 to have a special, to have a sign permit. And you don't want to pay any more than what you have.
The DMV.
And you don't have, the zoning administrator hasn't reviewed it yet.
No, that's what I was saying. It still has to be reviewed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
The next item on the agenda is a new Dollar General proposed at 1 East Dorsey Lane. Members of the board will recall that this is the site of the former Buchanan Carpet. It's more recently been, I believe,
It was
Interlocked.
Lisco, it was Lisco
not
carpet.
Buchanan, Lisco, sorry. And this is across Dorsey from St. Peter's, catty corner from Shelley's Deli.
Yep.
This is a pre-submission application, I believe. And can you, we know these two
Ramsey
characters, so
Housing,
when you,
do we
can you
know?
please state your names into the microphone for the record?
I'm Bridget Madison with Hicks Snedeker Companies. We're the developer and owner.
Mhm.
We will be the owner.
I don't know.
And I'm Chris Boyer with Bowler Engineering.
Thank you. The microphone is yours.
Okay, excellent, thank you. We're here tonight to start the site plan review process of a pretty exciting project at a corner that we would be redeveloping. I've got an aerial here that shows our site, and it shows the existing building that's up close to the intersection. That building would be removed, as well as the parking that's all there, and we'd redevelop the 1.8 acre site. The current use of that site is a multi-use building. It's been a couple uses over the years, and so it's always had a few different commercial uses that are in there. Our proposed project would just be a one-story dry goods retail facility that would be built. It'd be about 7,500 square feet.
Can you hold that closer, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as that goes on, it muffles it.
No problem.
Thank you.
So it'd be about 7,500 square feet. A dry goods retail store is an allowed use in this facility, in this zoning district. There's been some history on this over the last couple months, so although this might be the first time that some are seeing the project, we have been working with staff a little bit, and the land cost is expensive. So we did some due diligence up front and have been working on this for some time to make sure that we could get a project that made sense to bring before the board and to ultimately build. Our initial concept showed this concept right here. So this is just where we started. This is not where we're at. We're further than this now. But I just wanted to provide the board and staff with some ideas of where we're at. So we had the building back here. There's parking that would be visible at the corner. It became clear to us that that wasn't going to fly, that we should try to look at some alternate layouts.
That's not code compliant.
Not code compliant. We were also told to try to spruce up the architecture. So we were provided a lot of good information as we were going through the process. The current project that's proposed shows that building that is now pushed up closer towards where the building is today. And then the parking is behind the building in the rear of the site. This allows for some circulation of a full access on East Dorsey Lane, and then just a right out only on the state highway. That allows for our delivery trucks, as shown on our delivery truck movement here, to enter and then exit out onto the state highway. The proposed building per code would require 27 parking spaces. And so the project being presented tonight does show 27 parking spaces. There is one item that we wanted to talk about, which is scope and scale of this project. This project is a little over the scope and scale. Very close. It's 1,000 square feet over for the scope and scale.
Is that only the parking spaces?
It's almost double, right?
Excuse me?
The scale is almost double what's permitted?
Our code requires that all the 9x18 of every parking space is added to scale, not the drive-through, not the access lane, but every parking space has to be added.
Yep, yep. So today, there's what the site will allow is 11,250 square feet. That's what the site would allow per code.
Oh, okay, so you're assuming, I was gonna bring this up later, so this is a non-conforming site currently, but once that building's knocked down, it loses its non-conforming status, so you're starting fresh and you cannot take advantage of that section.
Gotcha.
So
In other words, what Victoria said so quickly is that we have the section of code that allows, through a special use permit, the expansion up to 50% of a non-conforming scale. But Tad's practice, as well, her guidance and our practice has been that once the building is removed, the non-conformance, you have to go back to the original zoning, which only allows 7,500 square feet. So there's a question in their EAF as to whether or not they need to go to the zoning board, but they will need to go to the zoning board of appeal since they're tearing the building down for whatever the difference is. But was that clear? Sorry.
Yeah, no,
The area
that was one of the questions, is whether this would be a waiver. We thought it was close. I now understand the logic there, and so
Well,
it sounds.
yeah, I mean, once it's gone, it's not non-conforming any longer, so.
Yep, yep. Okay. New York State DOT, we've also been working with those folks at the same time to try to get more input on this project early on. And so we've received written confirmation from them that they've conceptually approved the access locations at this location. So New York State DOT is mostly concerned with their road, which would be the right in, right out. We're still working with DPW on the other access drive. But we do have something from New York State DOT.
Mr. Boyer, can you forward that to us?
Actually, I have a copy of it with me
Great.
right here.
You can do it later on, before
Okay.
you leave.
All right, sure. We've also looked at this revised layout with the building close up to the corner and the parking in the rear. And we've created quite a large green space area in the rear between us and the residential area. There's two things that would happen in that green space area. There's no sewer, municipal sewer here at this location. So we have a septic system that's proposed up here. The site is a great reuse for the purposes of water and sewer. We only use about 100 to 200 gallons of water a day at the store because we don't serve beverages that go out the door. We don't produce food. We don't make odor. The toilet probably doesn't get flushed more than 3 times a day. So it's a very low use compared to any type, even less than a single family home.
Your employees have big bladders. And they're all very youthful, obviously,
We
too.
remember that from the other store. From the other store, they had a very small,
Yeah,
septic
it's-
system that
it's,
was approved.
We know it's a
dry
retail
use.
use, so it's only really
Right,
employees and
right.
maybe occasionally a customer, that's all.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other part of the green space that we would use is for stormwater there. So we were on the cusp of less than an acre of disturbance potentially doing this and keeping stormwater very compact on the site, or just using the whole site. We have the room to do it and make a larger site, disturb over an acre, and then just, implement the New York State DEC stormwater measures, cleans up the stormwater better, and I think that we're just going to go in that route, which is, disturb a little bit more of the site, but use most of it as green space for stormwater recharge. We have proposed some buffering from the residences in the rear, and then some buffering around the parking lot. Now, understanding that we're going to the zoning board for that coverage, that brings me to the second question I have. Maybe we can get an answer as quick as that. That would be good. The 27 parking spaces are provided. There is a section in the code, though, that talks about internal green space in the parking lot. And so we've added some landscaping and green around the perimeter and compacted our parking lot. We did this because we feel like the building, from the feedback that we've gotten to date, will help shield the parking that's behind it. So if we add green space islands in here, it's going to push the parking out further, and the building won't shield it as much. So we just didn't know if the board had a preference of let's add that green space in the parking lot, or whether that's a waiver that the planning board would look at during site plan review.
The term, actually, we don't use waiver, it's relaxation of a standard based on the unique characteristics of a lot, and you would ask for that relaxation using just the narrative you have tonight. But we'll hear from the board. The purpose of it being installed within the parking areas is to provide shade for customers as they park, not so much screening of the parking areas. Also, while I'm at it, I know you proposed some, let's see if this is working tonight. Yep. You proposed landscaping in through here because this is a residential use and that's required, but you haven't, I take it tonight you just want us to talk about the sort of broad layout because there's no actual landscaping proposed. There's no tree, bush, shrub, whatever. Okay. Yeah, so you'll hear from the board tonight what their preference is as you go along.
Okay. I think that's about it for the site. I'd like to just kind of switch over to the building if I could.
Sure.
So similarly, we've been working on the building. So this was the initial building that was shown. We were excited about it because I had a lot of dressed up items with the siding and some awnings and things, but it too became very clear right away that we need to do a gable roof, not a flat roof, and what more could we do? So we're really excited. I mean, this is definitely going to set a standard here for so what we've got here, this is the back of the building that's dressed up, and I actually have a color render of this too. So this would be the front of the building that faces the parking lot. And then we were asked to stay away from the tan schemes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was it your comment? We got a lot of feedback. I will say, there's been a lot of great feedback from help, and that, so maybe to go with more of, the gray earth tone feels that are here. So, so this is the render that we put together here for this location. Now, I didn't render all 4 sides because I'm interested to get, as we had talked about with the landscaping, same with the bill, the whole.
No,
this is-
we understand, that's the purpose of a pre-submission, so you get some general guidance from the board.
Yep.
And we're happy to do this. And it's been me who's been sitting in the meetings with your colleague, and I cannot pronounce her last name. so-
Karen Majanowski.
Say that again?
Karen Majanowski.
Majanowski, you make it sound very easily. I've been calling her Karen rather than, so at any rate. But yes, I gave her a heads up that, flat roofs are not allowed under our code.
Yeah.
Unless the building is such size that it has to be that way, and it's got to be disguised by parapets, et cetera,
Yeah.
cornices. And I did mention that many of our board preferred not to see continued tan or cream buildings.
No shades of beige.
They're all next to me, so I'm not as picky on colors, but I'm pretty sure you're going to hear positive reactions to that. We don't have that submitted, of course, yet. Karen did say that she thought that they were working on a new elevation.
Yeah.
So real quickly, since you're showing this, on the plans that we have, it says illuminated tenant logo, but it looks there as though that usually means internally lit signs, which are not allowed either. Is that showing internally lit or lighting down? I can't see from here.
It's showing gooseneck light fixtures.
That's what I thought, so,
That are
okay.
up here.
Good.
But we could still, those are channel letters. I guess that would be up to the board, and I know that the code is.
We changed the sign code so that what's backlit or halo lighting it's called
Yeah.
is permitted, as well as gooseneck. That's really your preference.
Okay, but we would try to comply with that, yes, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you should be trying to comply.
Yeah.
Because they're requirements, and whatever you don't want to comply with or think you shouldn't, you're going to have to put that in writing for the board
So
to
they will
consider.
not be internally illuminated.
Right. Before I go to the consultants, just want to point out one thing, because I've mentioned it to your colleague over and over again, and I see it didn't make it on here, and I'm sure it's because of expense, but the board will have to evaluate. The code would require a sidewalk all around here. We required a sidewalk at the used car sales across the way. This is an area because there's a neighborhood right around you, because there's a school, and because the built-in speed is lower, that I think the board will be asking to see the sidewalk along the way. Around the, that's right, you can't see, sorry. Along here,
There you go.
a sidewalk there to there, because
Along both
this.
frontages.
Yeah, this is a true four-corner crossroads. We don't have many of those, as you know, in our community. And we had them also put in across the street where Shelley's Deli is, et cetera. We also required it, as we recall, just down the way for the golf cart, Associates Golf Cart, and at Hyde Park Assisted Living Facility. So we're slowly but surely building a network of sidewalks in there. So otherwise, before I get into my comments, I'll ask Ms. Ackelson for her initial comments. Liz?
I'm going to yield my time to Pete.
Nice, very nice, very nice.
Your esteemed colleague from the South, Mr. Yes.
Yeah, to the south.
Mr. Sotero.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm glad you're working with the State Department of Transportation, and, the county. County unfortunately is not the fastest in, responding. So that's going to be important, to hear from them. But I have to say that one of the big items we discussed in our agenda meeting last Thursday was, I know that I have, and I think some of the planning board members that were at that meeting have a major issue with the fact that there's going to be cut-through traffic here for people that are going to want to avoid the traffic light, and are going to cut right through, the parking lot to try to go head north. And I think that's something that we all need, to think about.
Yeah.
As they're not going to want to go stop at the light. The chairman, in fact, even said that he would probably do it himself, right?
Off the
Wait.
record.
I made full confession that every once in a while when I'm coming up Dorsey, if I see the red light, I go back behind Shelley's Deli. I fully confess.
We got to put him on the spot every so often.
It's totally illegal, but I do it occasionally.
So anyway, that's an issue.
You're running late, right?
You know, the other thing is, you know, this was a site that at one time, Quick Check, you know, was looking at, and, you know, besides some other things that they had, that, you know, were issues, one of the big problems for them was gonna be how to manage, the drainage. There's, you know, I would assume that you're talking about, like, infiltrating everything? Because there's, you know, no natural, you know, drainage outlets to this site. The water doesn't go anywhere.
Yes, that's correct. In fact, as I had mentioned, the site is fairly expensive. And so we've been working on this site a little bit. And originally, we were going to try to have 2 uses on this site, which was...
That's correct.
Yeah. So because of the drainage, that came apparent that we needed more room for it. And we couldn't... We had to take the whole site down and only have 1 use. And that really was what drove it. So as you can see from the size of this, we do have good percolation rates that, you know, we'll have to submit the drainage report and everything else.
Yeah, oh, you actually did do
We
soil?
did, oh yeah, we've been working on this probably for 8 months. So when the sun was out and the soils were great, you know, we've been out and investigated it. So we have good drainage, and we have the room for 100-year attenuation here on this site without having the outlet. Now, we are talking with DOT about ultimately what happens if over a 100-year storm happens, you know, where is the overflow, what would happen? Right now, it does go out the rear towards
Right.
the houses.
Right.
So, I mean, that's what happens today. I guess that would happen later. What I've asked DOT for is, boy, is it possible at the 100-year mark if we could put a 4-inch pipe connection out to their system? And they're considering it, but they didn't say
Well,
that they
we're-
would.
Yeah, well, I would say that, and, you know, the town would probably, not probably, the town would have an issue with that, only because where their drainage exits behind Shelley's Deli over across the street, they've already got major issues over there with, you know, the DOT system basically ends up onto private properties. And, you know, it floods a bunch of private properties over there, you know, like on Dorsey. So, not to be, you know, the downer, but, you know, we'd have an issue with trying to add, or I would have an issue with trying to add any more drainage to
Okay.
the state system, just.
It makes our job easier. We won't
Yeah.
pursue that
Again,
connection.
I don't mean to be like a downer, but we're, you know, you're here trying to get
Yeah.
information, and, you know, we're giving it to you.
Pete's referring to the houses that sit behind Shelley's Deli
Yep.
as Dorsey goes down.
Yep.
They've
It's a
had-
sharp drop-off
It's a
there.
very sharp drop-off there.
I guess I'll add to that, once you start changing the natural flow of the water, if you're channelizing it and it ends up on the neighbor's yard, now you're gonna need a drainage easement.
So, I don't think drainage, I mean, we can talk about that more, but we're going to improve the current conditions. So everything's going to get better. I mean, it's going to come into current compliance with everything. You know, the volume, the storage. I mean, right now, there's no drainage system out there for what's there. So we're definitely going to improve the situation just by having retention and quite some large volume in that green space back there. But water always flows downhill, and it's always been there, and we would limit it to no more than what's there today. So I'm not sure that any easements or anything would be required. It's been there for some time.
Well, like I said, depending on what your proposal is, once you
No.
pipe it or channel it, it changes the flow and how quickly it flows onto the property. So
So those are.
in the past, we've required easements. I don't know what your situation is yet.
So again, this is just a pre-app, so those are just, you know, some verbal comments that we have, and if the project like proceeds, then obviously we'll get into it a little bit more once more information is provided.
I believe they want the project to proceed.
Well, I would say, I mean, you know.
I've been in several meetings with Hicks Snedeker as well as with Bowler.
I mean, I would say that you know, and I'm sure that, you know, you're trying, but I think you really need to get something from the County Public Works Department, because if they have some issues with your access, that may be a, you know, a major issue for the project,
Right.
like in general. And I know from my own projects there, they are way, way behind. I mean, months and months and months. So, good luck.
This is true because we referred Mr. Kaufman's property, Jeffrey
Groves.
Groves. It took them 6 months before they got a response back. And this is in a very rural area. They actually suggested, they have a complete streets checklist now, just like DOT does. They actually suggested we put in sidewalks where there are drainage swales and rock outcrops, so we didn't do it, but it just takes, they're moving a little slowly. That's Mr. Gill, Stephen Gill,
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
I
I
see.
mean, they have some other people there, but usually.
He
Joe is
reviews
the one-
for Hyde Park. You might want to get on the phone and keep staying on the phone to see
Can you
what.
steal back 30 seconds?
Yes, of course.
When you had the elevations up, maybe I didn't see it right, but I thought I saw kind of a sage green, not quite gray, which I liked. So I'm just saying that.
You don't have to say, they,
Subtle, wasn't she? Yeah.
There you go.
Liz is weighing in on color.
Any other comments, Peter, Liz? Ms. Polidoro, any comments at this point?
Just a few, I'll start with procedure. So we know there's a variance, and just so you know, the way that the zoning board and planning board operate in this town is that the planning board takes lead agency. So you'd continue with your review before the planning board until you get to the point of a neg deck. You could concurrently go to the zoning board of appeals, but they couldn't
Take action.
approve or deny a variance, take any action until a negative declaration has been issued by this board. So there would be a concurrent review process. So this board would have to have enough information on environmental impacts before it in order to make that determination. Second, just for the board, just take a look at the design standards because the plan as proposed doesn't meet a number of them. So you would have to decide whether you want to relax those standards or not. But for instance, it doesn't have sidewalks, it doesn't have street trees. The parking doesn't have landscaping.
Within this, within it?
Within
the
it,
stalls?
the primary entrances shall be located at the lot frontage. Again, it might not be applicable in this case, but something you have to address. Flat roofs are not permitted. I know that they brought something new tonight. And then, we're just looking for more detail on the plans.
Actually, if I could just ask one more question quick, as I was
Yes, you
thinking about it.
may.
Why do you need to have the access out to the state highway?
It's for delivery truck. So on the original plan that I've already put away, because we're not talking about it, that has on-site circulation where a truck can back up on-site. But when we bring the building up close and try to limit the amount of pavement and impervious area, because we've got the lot coverage issue that we've currently are struggling with, that truck can now have a way to enter and exit the site. So it's purely for the delivery truck.
But it's only going to be an exit, so that means that any
That's right.
truck would have to go north.
That's correct.
What happens if the truck wants to go
That's-
south?
No, we've looked at this, again, we've been looking at this for a while with Dollar General. This is not a franchisee, this is a corporate.
Actually, we're aware of that. We have another Dollar General in
Yeah.
town. This is when they were first making the transition from having franchises to corporate-owned.
So they look at, they can control truck routes and see how things go, and they have a trucking department and transportation, and take a look to see whether it's a viable. In fact, on this one, they've even reduced it to a WB, smaller than 67, which is what it was, because of the site constraints that were there. So they've looked at
So
that.
why couldn't, because once the truck is backed into, the loading zone, why couldn't they just come back out, the main entrance and then head back out to, the traffic light? I guess where I'm going is if there's enough of a concern by, the town that this could create a serious, cut-through problem at, the traffic light, that, is there, like a viable option not to have that access onto 9J?
So I'll submit this, but this is the New York State conceptual approval of that driveway that's there that you're talking about. And I think there's more discussions that
But
can
we don't
happen.
have to, just because, if
Oh, no,
we.
I understand, I
If we,
understand.
if we talk to the state and the town, I'm just saying, if the town is not in favor of having that because there is a concern, the state will side with the town, so.
Understood, and I think there's more discussion that can have. We're at a conceptual level here.
Right, sure.
I think that the concern that I'm hearing is that, cut-through potential, and we need it for the truck. We might be able to sign it that no exit. and then the truck just uses it for a truck turn-only movement that's out there. I mean, we might be,
Yeah, good
we might
luck.
be able to do grass block between the two. I think there's some creative things that we could do to.
All right,
to
well,
work on.
I'll just bring it
So
up.
since I was accused of doing illegal maneuvering, I will merely point out
And
that
we're
one of
trying to
the,
save tickets on
one of the
behalf
differences that, and it's only when I'm late for a DCC Board of Trustees meeting, I promise, that's all.
All right.
That's why I go to the college. Where I go behind Shelley's Deli, there's no pedestrian movement. Here, you're talking about pedestrian interaction crossing the drive. That's really, I think, the issue that's paramount there. So if people were coming through
No, I-
and zooming, you might wind up
Zooming.
having accidents and through here. So that is one difference, because I don't cross anywhere pedestrians are going except for the sidewalk where I have to stop. Let me start to my,
Anyways, thank you.
yep, let me start to my right. Mr. Napoli, comments?
I have several. I know you're all shocked. I'm going to start with something that's extremely minor. And that is that this is an historic building. And it was an original Grange, and President Roosevelt attended meetings there. So once this all comes to fruition and you have this beautiful new building, is it possible to have a small plaque in there stating the historical significance of the spot? You know, with the original design of the original building? Just that we keep a little bit of history going?
Maybe a little monument?
Hmm?
A little monument?
Yes.
Ms. Whitman has a little
Yeah.
commemorative thing, I think, program or something, that shows what the original.
The Chapel Corner Green.
That's it, right there.
Yep.
You'd be
It ju-
talking about
yeah,
something
and
like
it-
that?
Yeah, it would just be a nice little memento. Thank you for changing from the flat roof to a non-flat roof. Thank you tremendously for getting rid of the beige, white, or whatever. And I do agree with Liz, it did look more like sage green than gray.
Which is it?
I'm okay either one, yeah, which is, you know, that's your choice. I do have a question again, Mr. Chairman. I know the code states, as you were saying, for the size and the traffic, 27 parking spaces. And that's something the planning board can relax.
No, actually,
No?
those are not requirements. Our code is, these are parking suggestions,
Right.
so there's no required parking. Generally speaking, retail businesses like to have as much parking as possible. So that's what the code is sort of based on that, because it's based on square footage. In other words, how many patrons could be in there at one
Right.
time, plus employees.
Which leads me to my thinking of, one, is that really necessary for this type of business? Comparing it to the other Dollar General down the road, the usage of that many, so if you condensed it a little, would that then allow for some landscaping around, keeping within?
What we generally do in those cases is ask them to show like an area where if they do experience problems with parking, where there would be banked parking, so you wouldn't have to come back to us. So that then if they experience an overflow, they could then come
Right.
basically to TAD and say, we
Yes.
need to go ahead and use the bank parking and actually pave it and stick it in. But that's maybe for you to discuss with your client.
Because that might just be a solution that would.
You're talking about maybe having one removed, shown elsewhere, so you could have one.
She was, I think she's saying replace with the island,
Mhm.
right? Because if
Uh-huh.
you do the land banked parking, we still need to include that in the total
I
calculation.
can't hear you.
We
I'm
can't hear
sorry.
you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to understand your suggestion, and I was saying if you're just taking out spaces to add an island, it reduces the size of the variance they need. But if you're land banking it, they need to include a land bank spaces within the variance.
So that they
Just
don't lose.
different options.
Yeah, no, I don't want them to lose there.
Yep.
Yeah, so they can just kind of land bank. No, I was thinking, I don't know how many you would need. I mean, that's a computer thing you can look at. You know, does it need 2? Does it need 3? Does it need 1? You know, whatever, so you can do some landscaping along the way. I do feel it really is important in this area to have sidewalks. We're building sidewalks to somewhere, and if you're not there, we stop, and we want to keep going forward. in town. And then down the road, you'll be submitting later a lighting plan, I'm assuming?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you talk about buffering for the residential area, what were you just thinking? I don't mean the specific thing, but were you thinking trees, bushes?
What we're initially thinking is some sort of a hard buffer to start with. So something opaque, a 6-foot-high stockade wood type fence to start with. So it's, something solid. And then we could soften it
Soften it with something
with some
green.
vegetation.
Yeah, I have that, the privacy fence that they proposed with the privacy fence in front of it or on the property line, as well as landscaping. I just had all my comments that you have to detail the materials at some point.
And then a bench on the outside?
Like pedestrian seating?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please. Oh, when we were at the agenda meeting, someone suggested solar. Were you considering that?
That was me when they had the flat roof, sorry.
Oh.
DEC
Okay.
requires us, we're supposed to be trying to advance green techniques,
Bless you.
keep stormwater on site and advance green energy. So when you had flat roofs, it looked like it might be ideal. But that's changed now with this plan substantially.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that covers sidewalks. Yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver, comments?
First off, thank you for looking at Hyde Park and looking past the expense of the site and looking at how you can make it work. For the septic system, does it have to go there? Is that like the best perk rates on the property? Is that why you're selecting it?
So, to the point that was made, once we take the building down, we lose any kind of grandfather clause. So for Dutchess County, there's an existing well and septic here, but the idea is, can you make it better? So, that's the best location that there is per health code requirements, because all the houses behind us are on wells.
Mm-hmm.
So the further we come towards us, that's where it's at. Doesn't mean it has to go there, but that's the best spot.
The reason I was asking is if, because I agree with Pete that I think that's gonna create a major cut-through issue. And I was just kind of looking if you kind of shrunk the parking area, not really shrunk it, but made it more like a square and ran the parking in the middle of the parking lot and then had the exit come out and kind of do like a long
We could
S-turn if it would work with
Instead of
turning
straight,
radius.
the straight through.
Instead of straight, and add some congestion with stop signs and stuff.
We could look at that. The septic would most likely stay there. I'll tell you, it's getting tougher and tougher in New York State. We just talked about how there's only about 100, 200 gallons of water a day. But because we have a water fountain, we are a public drinking water supply.
Oh.
So we have a well on this location, and that septic's right at 200 feet away from that well, because that's what the county would like.
Separation requirement.
Yep.
So usually it's 100 feet, and you'd be fine, but that darn water,
Yeah, because you're public
the
water.
codes upon codes is tough. So we could still do something like what you're talking about, though. We would just,
It's just an idea,
Yeah.
something to look at
yeah, we
that,
could look at
might
something like that.
make us feel a little better about that cut-through.
Yeah.
And then a comment about the landscaped islands. Me personally, I'd be okay without them, because I think they create issues for maintaining the parking lot, in the wintertime. And maybe to add some landscaped islands around the sidewalk, and maybe a landscape buffer between the main sidewalk and the entrance of the building and the building.
Good idea.
And that's all. Thank you.
Great comments, Chris, as always. Ms. Dexter?
I would echo welcoming anybody looking to try to improve a site and come into Hyde Park, thank you. and also working so long to see what you can do with the site. So that's, my hat's off to you. I would also echo that I think sidewalks are a must if you're going to redevelop the site. I guess so you've gone from the, would you mind putting up the,
Well, by the way,
The-
the first proposal we met, they were putting a building here.
right,
Right
right,
there, where the
And all the-
stormwater management is.
and all the parking in the front?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've,
On both of the frontages, right?
Yeah,
I just wanna-
I had to be the heavy and say no on that one. Sorry.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, and so by peaking the roof, will that also bump up the scale, right? Or is that,
If there's not a second floor,
No.
then no.
okay, because I was just thinking of some of the variances that they needed for the town center, because they went from the flat roof to up.
But because
That
we
That's
had-
volume,
That
right?
was cubic volume.
That was cubic
Cubic volume.
because
So as
look
long as
into-
the site's not,
Right.
not near a historic site, and we've checked, and even though this is a historic range, it's not individually listed.
It's, right, it's not, okay.
Itself.
I
So
just
they're
wanted to
fine.
make sure that we,
This is a quirk in our
And
code that we
We're far
discovered.
enough from Valkill,
You're
right?
not- It doesn't apply to you.
Okay.
I would echo my colleague's request to just take a look at that parking again. I know people are going to cut right through that. I've had the opportunity, now that I've changed jobs, I now drive by the existing Dollar General and this site every single morning. And what I've noticed is that at 8:10 in the morning, there are already cars at the Dollar
Mhm.
General that's already existing. I noticed that, I think today or yesterday, I saw the truck was delivering, and I saw he was there first thing, a little bit after 8, but that there were already customers there. As the day goes on, that parking lot is busy. It's a very popular store. I am not sure that I would recommend reducing the parking, because I'm telling you, there, especially around Christmas, and
Mhm.
I drove by and there was no parking left. They were parking at Jim's Auto Body and walking over.
Oh, boy.
I could
La,
not,
la,
bel-
la, la, la.
oh, I couldn't believe how popular it is. So I can, apparently your numbers,
High demand, or they wouldn't put one
well,
down
it-
the road.
right, right. I'm not even gonna question any of that. So I would not recommend losing any parking, but I would ask you to take a look at a creative reconfiguring of it to see if there's any way to just make, if someone's sitting there waiting for the light and looking over, making them go, might as well just wait. Because they will cut through. Because that is a very busy intersection, especially on a weekday morning. Everybody's trying to get to school. I would also bring up the fact that because you have a school right across the street,
Mhm.
there are, the traffic circulation for the buses and people dropping off their kids at St. Peter's blows my mind.
Isn't, closing lines?
It makes me really concerned, because they have a circular thing. So they come, if they're coming from the east, they come up to the traffic light and they take a left onto 9G, and then they park on the road, waiting to make a left into the St. Peter's parking lot. And the traffic backs up,
Yeah.
and it backs up through the light, and sometimes it blocks the light, because sometimes you have 3 buses all trying to take a left-hand turn, nobody can go around them. It becomes quite an issue. And so if you're gonna be opening your store at 8, I'm thinking, ooh, that could get really messy really fast. And so I'm thinking that that might be some of the concerns of the county, if they're looking at that entranceway there. So I'm just bringing it up because I'm now seeing it every single day, especially when school is in session. I'm also a little bit concerned about where you are exiting onto East Dorsey, because the clashes with the church. Now, granted, it's a church and a school, so it's not occupied all the time, but when it is, there's a lot of cars. And so I'm just a little bit concerned about the interaction at that point, because I know that this store will be very popular, and that they might just be zipping right over from
Location and
church into there to pick up stuff. So I just want to bring that up. Just, I'm not sure how the county is going to think about that, but,
Well, I'm gonna go send him an email, actually, after the meeting tonight about this, because we want to make sure that as they, like, deliberate on whatever that the applicant sent, that they take into account what you're, discussing. So I just put down here to send Steve Gill an email.
yeah,
just to
okay.
Make sure that they do that, so I'll copy on it. Board.
Okay. Yeah, so that's just one of my big concerns, is just that whole interaction of traffic.
And it does get really congested in there.
Yeah, and at the wrong
I didn't
time,
even
it's
think about
like,
that.
at the wrong time, it's just not good. And you're like, why are they all taking, why did they design it so everybody's making a left-hand turn? But I do understand it, because it's a circle, so they can all come back out
That's
to
exactly
the,
right.
to the light. So they're not making any left-hand turns without the light. So I do understand why they're doing that. And then just one of the things that when I look at the corner there, I'm looking at the green space at the intersection of 9G and the East Dorsey. And I'm just wondering, maybe that might be a nice place for a bench or something, that someone can just go, and if it's nice green.
It's got an elevation
I'm
that goes
pretty
up.
sure that's all gonna go away once they do the site.
Yeah, we don't have a grading plan yet, so.
Because it goes up, so I'm imagining when you're redoing the whole site, that's gonna be pretty level.
Actually, it's gonna continue to stay up a little bit, because again, the drainage goes to the rear of the lot.
Right.
So-
Okay.
So we want to do that. We want to get that.
Okay, because that's a fairly dramatic change, so I'm just, but that was my final comment.
Those are great comments. And we turn it over to you, Mr. Pickett. Got the pointer? Your comments?
Yes. The sidewalks, again, are a must, and street trees. Michael can help you a lot with recommendations on what we'd like to see there. Also be paying a lot of attention to the buffering to the residences to make sure that that looks good from both sides. And the other thing is the drive-through. Now, you said this entrance, that this was done for trucks, just for the delivery. Are they a semi or a smaller box truck or
Tractor trailer.
tractor trailer? Okay, because I was thinking, what about if you could do like a turnaround up in here to come back out and then block this off? But that's
Well,
probably.
it is possible. I mean, anything's possible right now. We're at this conceptual stage.
Yeah, all it takes is money and engineering.
Well, right,
Yeah.
but I think that's the point of tonight, is to make sure that if Bridget walks out of here and goes, oh, I can't afford it, we need to know it now, but before it's too late. So it is possible, and just thinking out loud, I mean, we could make a turnaround, like a hammerhead area for the truck to turn around. The problem with that, though, is, and the biggest thing I see, like my biggest fear from what I'm hearing tonight so far, is that if I do that hammerhead turnaround, that increases my coverage of lot, it increases,
Right.
it changes my request to the variance. I can't get a variance. So really the whole project hinges on that scale variance that I won't get an answer on until I've made full site plan approval.
Not full site plan approval. We just have to conclude seeker before they can give the
Seeker.
variance.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, they're required to confer with us. We have a recommendation based on it. I always write the recommendations. I write for the board.
I see that.
And if your variance increases that you'll be going for because of changes we make, how do you think I'm going to be recommending? Trust me, this is how we work with our sister agencies, because there are times we don't really want you to start there until we feel like we have something that we think that everybody kind of agrees on that can go forward. So if it's an increase in scale, the area variance, because it's something that's been designed at our request, I can guarantee you the board will be telling me to make a positive recommendation.
We can look at maybe doing a truck turn then,
Yes.
if
Well,
that's,
right,
Over the-
a truck turnaround isn't gonna affect scale. Liz is right. Scale
'Cause
is
it's
the
just the
calculation
road.
of parking spaces and the building.
And that's it.
Right.
okay.
So the impervious is a separate issue and a separate calculation.
That's lot
But
coverage.
your truck has to, even on your current layouts, your truck has to pull up into that current, exit drive and then back into, the loading dock, correct?
Yeah.
So once they're backed in, then they can just come back out the main entrance. right?
With some more wider turn movements, yes.
Yep.
And you wouldn't have to talk to New York State DOT, right?
Well, DOT's already okay with it, but to the point is if the town's not, then that's really the issue at this point.
Were you dealing with the local, obviously you're dealing with the local office. Mr. Bentley signed that?
Chuck Walter.
Oh, Chuck, yep.
You got to deal with.
Mr. Bentley is working in another permit
Jurisdiction?
office now.
Oh.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, and actually, before even coming here, like we said, we tried to do as much homework as we could. I will submit that DOT letter. We also have sign off from SHPO on the whole project.
Yes, that's right. They do.
And we also have sign off on Parks Recreation for the seeker.
Good, good.
So we're trying to uncover any issues.
That's the purpose of the meetings I've been having with you guys, is
Yeah.
so that we tell you in advance that that's what my job is to say, here's some hurdles you might want to
Been
look at.
huge, helpful. Thank you.
The other thought was having the main entrance on 9G and just closing the other one off. Is that?
Oh,
Well,
no.
seeing
I
how
don't
long,
think I don't think they'd let you.
well, I'd be
Yeah,
willing to
okay.
ask. I'd be willing to ask because Chuck Walter might get back to me before the county.
It's just, you're so close to the intersection, I would be shocked if they'd allow, because you'd be looking at people wanting to take a left in there. I'd be surprised, honestly.
Would it be something that the board would support or no?
We want to make it, look, you've heard up here, my colleagues have all welcomed you. We actually like investment in Hyde Park. That's our job, to say thank you for coming. So we want to make this the best site that's possible. We appreciate, that's why you heard nice things about the architecture already, even though I usually don't allow anybody to speak on things that haven't been submitted beforehand, but I can tell you that is an improvement. So we just want to make sure that this site works safely and effectively. So if you think that changing the entrance or changing that layout will work better, then we would generally try to support you with that.
Right.
If that makes sense.
But they
Especially
can't
if it's
comment
not
on
in
something without
conflict.
seeing how it would work.
Right.
If it's not in conflict with what's going on East Dorsey,
Yeah,
and you have the main entrance.
It might
at
actually really help with the St. Peter's issue.
Yeah,
But you have to go back, I would talk to DOT first. Again, it's just the proximity of where you are
Right,
to that intersection.
right.
And when you said you're in Dutchess, I thought, where's he from? And then I looked, you're from Albany, I believe, or I assume not Rochester, but most of us, Ann and I have been up here 14 years, or yes,
Yeah.
14 years. Chris has been here now 7, 8? Yeah.
Wow.
So we're actually, it's a long-serving board. Long-serving board. We're familiar with all the requirements in the county, and we've been working with DOT for a long, long time, because almost all development that's commercial occurs on 9 or 9G. It's just the way it is. We're a long linear town. So it's my estimate that they might say no and balk at it, but if you're dealing with Chuck, you're dealing with someone who's more flexible,
And he
willing to
knows the
work with
area.
you, and he just lives down the street on 9G. So, but I would pass that by him sort of conceptually first. You haven't made a full submission yet, so you're still in that phase where you can do this, but I also am aware that every time you make iterations, your soft costs go up. So again, that's also up to your client, Ms. Madison, for how you want to look at it. But you hear the concerns from many of my colleagues and our engineering consultant about traffic, and the possibility of the cut-through traffic, I should say.
And our flexibility.
Yeah.
Done.
Okay.
And I
so
did have one more comment that I forgot
Please.
to say. I really like your building.
That
I really,
Right.
I really like your
Second
building.
that as well.
I know.
I should have led with
preliminarily.
that.
Preliminarily, but I will tell you, when people ask me, I often get asked, how can I get through the planning board quickly? And I tell them 2 things. 1, read the code and make sure it's compliant, or that you ask us where not to comply. And 2, give good architecture. We love good architecture. We all are trying to make the town both look better and function better. And this is a nice looking building. I'm not seeing the details,
Tell
but
me
it looks
what
pretty
the
good.
materials are?
We actually haven't gotten that
Yeah.
far into it.
That's
I
okay.
mean, there's,
Just
It's like
curious.
hardy board and,
So
yeah.
I'm going to go through my comments quickly. They're pretty detailed. And if you want, I can email these to you instead of you having to speed read. So first, the sidewalks between all uses need to be shown. I heard that from my colleagues. The second is already moved because I said no flat roofs or had to disguise it. 3, I believe that the board hasn't really weighed in on the parking requiring it to be in the parking stall areas. But if I think you made a compelling argument for me that actually if we add them, that you're going to have to widen the parking. So like Chris, Mr. Oliver, I'm also okay with it. The loading dock has to be screened. I know you've proposed something there, but I just want to make sure we know what it is ultimately, because you just have generic plants there shown. 5, the photometric plan. I know you're going to have to submit one, and the light pole, you show some lights, but you don't show the light pole details. Those will need to be shown. Tear sheets or, insets into the plan itself. We'll need to know the materials of the awning. Of course, you'll have to provide the stormwater management details ultimately. 9, detail the materials for the proposed privacy fence. 10, this is probably most important that you don't know yet, or rather, I believe you're proposing 3 wall signs. A maximum of 2 is allowed. So you'd need, I guess, I'm not sure what you would need to get a 3rd wall sign.
It's an area variance.
On the old one, you have one facing Dorsey, you have one facing the intersection, and one facing 9G.
Including a monument?
Let's look at the new one.
You may not have it on the new one. That's what I was going to say. It was just on the old plans, the elevation, you had 3.
So really, there's only one.
Oh.
We're gonna propose a second, right?
So the code allows 2 wall signs and 1 monument sign. So on your original,
You had
we
3
didn't
on the
have a
original.
detail, it just showed a sign area, but it showed 3 wall signs. And I had to tell you, I think you have to have a use variance to get the 3rd, the way our code is written. You do need a variance to exceed the allowed scale of 7,500. On the EAF, B, lowercase c, and E, as well as C3D, D2, C6, and D2M. You've checked that noise there won't be noise exceeding the ambient levels, but the truth is that noise will exceed ambient levels during construction. That needs to be changed. I at a 13 point to consider solar panels, but in truth, the way you're designing this, I don't think that that's necessarily required anymore. You want to show a detailed grading plan because there's going to be grading here, I know. This is now, I told you I'm getting into the weeds. You have no owner signature block on the site plan. You'll need that, so both I can sign and the owner can sign, or the new owners. In the EAF, it says that you're going to have, this will be open 24/7, I believe. That's
Yeah,
shown that
we-
it's open nonstop.
Yeah, we always ask for that because this is owned and developed by Bridget and her company. It's got a lease for 15 years with extensions,
Mhm.
and it depends on the market, how it does. Most of them are not open 24/7, but we just ask for it.
Let me just, I promise you're really nice up here. So, what I was going to say is in instances where we have the allowed permitted use to be 24/7, we generally restrict the hours of delivery because you're located right behind to housing. So that's something for the board to consider for restricting the hours of delivery. We've had to do a lot of noise impact studies up here over the years. We've learned that when you have a truck backing in, it makes sharp percussive sounds, beep, 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 and that's what annoys people more than more like a continuous often sound. So that's why we'd be looking to restrict the hours so they couldn't say come in at 2 in the morning. That's all. It'd just be a note on the map. It's very simple, but like I said, I'm trying to get into details. Ms. Polidoro alluded to the section of code. Let's see if I used to know it by heart. I don't. Yes, there it is. The primary entrances to any building shall be oriented to the lot frontage. Secondary entrances shall be oriented to parking plazas or parks. In this case, what that would seem to say is that there would need to be an extra door here with a sidewalk maybe coming up there in case people were walking. Just ask for a relaxation of that standard. It's 108-4.5 G1C1. Because I think that you could make the case, I already know what your answer is going to be, and that is that these are fairly standard line, the interior, the way it's lined up, and you're going to have shelving on the side over there. I know this. And in addition, it was pointed out someplace else that the consultants can't see this, but another board in another town required that there to be an entrance there. And so all they did was make a little false tunnel right here or hallway to make them go back into the front anyway, because you can't lose your space there. So we want to work with you on this, in other words. County planning, which will be required to refer this to under 239M, I can guarantee you will tell us that there should be an entrance there, because otherwise, I can hear her term, you're turning your back on the main arterial there. So in order to sort of deal with the county planning comments, we would need to have some way to justify that we're not putting that section of code in. That's all.
Right, so you should either consider adding the entrance or providing justification why you don't think it's necessary.
I might point out that, I'm not supposed to lead the witness, but there is a really steep grade there, so you'd have people going up a steep grade, danger of icing on that sidewalk, et cetera. I'm just offering that out there. It's what I thought for why I wouldn't be requiring it, to be honest with you. Because we do try to make sure that there is some sort of nice look for the building that's facing the intersection that people see every day. It also makes it more attractive for customers coming, and it draws their eye. But in this case, I've had to put political signs up there, and it's gravel, and it's steep. So, just something for you to consider. Like I said, if you'd like me to email my comments to you, I can. So you've heard, you took both copious notes, I noticed, so I'm not going to review everything you heard, but primarily additional sidewalks from everybody, also a warm welcome. I hope it was a warm welcome. When I first was approached by Hicks Snedeker, they only called it a dry goods retail. And then the second time when they said, oh, it's a Dollar General, I have to say, we were all a little bit shocked because it's so close to the other location. And I don't get to that part of 9G that often, where the other, but as Ann's telling me it's busy, then that's probably why they want another one here, because they're making a profit. So anytime that we can see a new business come in that looks like it's going to have longevity and not close within 3 years, that's a good thing for Hyde Park and for us to see. And this is, just glancing, this is a substantial aesthetic upgrade from what exists there now. If you haven't been in the building, the lower floor is moldy, so this will be an improvement in almost every possible way. So what would you like, I take it that you're going to go back, respond to our comments, make some revisions, look at the idea of the cut through traffic, and then make a real submission?
We don't have a real application. Yes.
Yeah, this is still pre-submission. I mean, you can have as many pre-submissions as you want, you just have to you have to start paying for them. If you want to meet offline, when I'm, and maybe some other colleagues are on the, can meet to discuss, those don't cost, because it's not a full one, but consultants aren't there, so it's just me and, like I said, another couple of colleagues from the planning board.
Yeah, you guys have given us a lot of great information tonight, and we're gonna have to think about how best to go forward. It's clear that this is gonna be a multi-month process where, you know, we have to now go to zoning board. We found that out tonight, for sure. So.
Well,
Ted
again,
told you that earlier.
the scale requirement, the variance request, as you know from dealing with ZBAs, I'm certain, is the minimum necessary. So whatever, before you start that process, you would need to make any changes that you want to do.
You gotta come back here first. I understand.
I just think it's more efficient that way. And we do try to work speedily, I assure you, but you will need permits from other agencies, obviously, and
Yeah.
we can't control that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you'll need a speedies permit
We
from
will.
DEC, and that's another agency that doesn't
Can take a
always
while.
work in lightning fashion.
Yeah.
But, and one advantage to having people having I mean, I've been chair up here for a long time. I know all the DEC people here, and if you have problems with them, I can always make a phone call and get right through, I assure you.
Oh, just so we're clear too, we didn't make the determination that the area variance was needed. The zoning administrator
Right.
issued a determination January 29th to your firm, stating that the area variance would be needed.
That's why I said that's our zoning administrator's guidance, is once something's, and by the way, this is not you, this is everybody. We had a bowling alley that the use had lapsed, and for 15 years.
At least.
And it's in the same district, so it was 40,000 square feet above the 7,500, and she had them, before they could even start to demolish part of the building, they had to get a variance for what was left. It wasn't an issue because it was already there. Most of, getting variances like that, the criteria is primarily impacts on the neighborhood and the character of the community. If it's already there, it's not much of a big deal. And while I can't guarantee you'd get anything from the ZBA, generally, having sat through their meetings many a time, they look at what you're proposing, and if it's an improvement, they're usually kind, if you get my drift.
So I think,
We do have a new
leaving
board.
here tonight, what we wanted to kind of accomplish, so that Bridget can make some decisions on how best to proceed with the project, is we now understand the process a little bit better. And we know it's gonna maybe take a little longer than maybe we thought originally, so we can cross that bridge with.
Well, again, the variance can be sought concurrently.
Yep, yeah.
We can't do secret determination because you don't have a full
We want to come back to this
Yeah.
board first, just like you said, to kind of address these concerns before we
Mhm.
even apply for,
Okay,
I think that that makes sense, because this board obviously is gonna make a recommendation, and we want this board to be happy. So, so we'll work through the time constraints with the tenant. You know, sometimes there's a certain day when they have to be in, is it gonna open this year, is it gonna open in 2009? You know, they worry about that stuff.
well, we understand why.
So that's one thing that we'll go back and look at. I think that what we'd like to leave here, though, so that Bridget can make the rest of the decisions, is any large financial things that we can see. So we've already kind of thought, okay, we're gonna update the building, and that's gonna cost more.
Mhm.
And then we wanted to make sure that the general layout is on the right track. So other than the cut-through traffic, which we can try to solve, and some adjustments to the parking lot here or there, which we can try to solve, is the general building placement on the site and the
Oh.
parking situation.
I think you've heard all of us say
Yeah.
yes on
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And the
We
general.
try to be directional, and I know, that's why I said, you're looking for broad concept comments,
Yeah.
and that's what you've received. Because, I mean, I went a little granular just because I like to speed. My job is to make sure that we get through the process as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
So I'll go way down into the weeds with you to
Soon
make
as you
sure
see
that.
something.
Yeah, to make sure that you know that the next time it should be on the plans.
So now we have an idea of what we can budget for building, we have an idea of what we can budget for site. Landscaping wise and sidewalks, I think I heard most people talk about sidewalks.
Mhm.
That's a big expense, because we just happen to be fortunate enough to be on a very long road frontage
Yep.
property.
Where?
So, I mean, that's
It's,
something
as I
we're
said,
gonna-
it's an issue particularly here because you do have several neighborhoods all around.
Understood.
And it's a requirement in the code, and we've been consistent about, like I said, just across the street from you, there's also sidewalks proposed, or the sidewalks installed over there.
So with that expense, because that would be a major expense, is the amount of landscaping. We haven't provided the landscaping yet, but just generally pictorially, is the amount of landscaping here look adequate
It
with
looks like
sidewalks?
it looks pretty heavy on the landscaping to me, but I couldn't tell what you're using because you have like the nuclear radiation thing as a symbol, which meant like nuclear death to me, but I'm just teasing.
It doesn't mean anything.
No, I'll be honest with you, to control expenses, you could consider something like privet. 'Cause you already have a hardscape
Yeah.
for screening
Yeah.
and for sound attenuation. You've got a fence proposed. So if you're gonna have something in front of it, you could have privet, or you could have forsythia.
Inkberry?
Yeah, inkberry. There's lots of things you can do that would be native, that would be low maintenance,
Low cost?
low cost. By the way, Mr. Oliver's a landscaper, so, and I'm a former master gardener, so that's why they were alluding to what,
Once a master gardener,
always a master gardener. But true.
Yeah,
But he
so,
doesn't pull weeds anymore.
okay, so we were not gonna go too much, the sidewalks, and I don't think I heard any other big,
No, that would be the biggest expense,
that
I know,
would-
because it's a large area.
so, concept building design, there'd be a referral to the zoning board, and seeker,
Seeker, we'd initiate, as soon as you have a complete submission,
yep,
we'd go ahead and start circulating for lead agency. It would go to DC, DPW, and DOT, DEC for your speedies permit. I presume.
To the fire department.
Department of Health, since there'd be a new septic system. Fire department is a courtesy to make sure that they agree with everything. By the way, our fire departments here, they're nice to work with too. They generally ask for a Knox box to be installed so that there's a key, so they don't have to.
Crash in, yeah.
Crash into your thing. It's easy. That's, anybody else we'd be referring to? DCWWA? No, because it's a well water. I mean, it's well, served by wells.
Mhm.
That'd be about it.
Visual environment.
DEC,
DEC for the speedies
maybe
permit.
visual environment, well, also DEC public water, right?
Oh,
Or maybe that's.
public water, you're public water?
no, this is a well.
Right, but you said it was public because it's a drinking
Well,
fountain, it's a public water?
You're classified under as a
Public water supply.
Are you sure about that? You said
Just because of a drinking fountain?
We've been there, done that, yes.
Really?
Because it serves more than 10 people,
Yeah.
potentially, yeah.
So, Ms. Madison, where are you from?
Oh,
I live in Alabama.
That's what I thought. So when,
Charlotte, North Carolina.
no, but when I first met your
Yeah, and
colleagues,
even though you've already done your preliminary work, the board will formally have to do a seeker circulation with SHPO, with DOT, I mean, so we'll have to send it back, even though you've already sent it.
but you'd already taken care of it, so, and I'd heard about the
You've un-
SHPO
you've
from your
uncovered or
colleague.
not uncovered.
I'm from the South originally too, so when I heard, after like 30 minutes of talking to your colleagues, I was like, hey, y'all, I'm from Louisiana, I'm Louisiana and Texas. That's where I grew up. I've been up here 30 years.
I know.
Yeah. So, and I could hear you, I was like, I hear Southern over there, so.
I don't think I'm Southern, but I come here.
Oh, yeah, you're Southern.
I am.
That's because when you're with everybody else who speaks the way
There's more
I grew
Southern
up.
than me there, yeah.
Well, Alabama has a really thick accent too.
I'm not from there.
No, you're from North Carolina, so, but yeah, you're urban, but I could still hear it. So feel free to get in touch with me through Ms. Whitman anytime, if I can be of assistance in helping guide you in any way. So
Yeah.
we'll wait to hear back from you.
Yep, and I think the only piece that I just want to clarify, if I could somehow figure out a way to have one access to this site, that's, doesn't matter what road it's from, or as long as whoever's road it is happy,
Yep,
that,
yep.
that might be a benefit.
So
Yes.
It certainly sounds like it.
sounds like it, but they can't give you feedback without actually seeing the plan.
Right.
Because
Right.
it could be they look at it and it doesn't work, and we don't want to lead you down the wrong path, and then
But if you're saying
you have to
can
decide what you think
cut-
works best,
but
but
if
we've heard the
conceptually-
cut
concern.
that or cut that, then I think that's probably, it's the cut through that I think everybody's alarmed with. And again, it's mainly because you're going to have people parking on both sides of it, so there'll be pedestrian interaction. And you don't want to have, your client doesn't, or your tenant would not want to be sued for something like that anyway.
Yeah.
And it's mainly because all of us have lived here a long time.
So
Some were born and raised here.
I have another recommendation.
Yes.
If you do intend to proceed, I'm going to recommend that you replenish your escrow so that you can contact the consultants directly. So you could reach out to the engineer if you have questions before you put together your application.
How much do you want? How much do you think?
Well, we put 500 into both of them for this
Oh, I thought
meeting.
you said to replenish it.
No, I think
Yeah,
it is,
yeah, I mean, that's
I
gone.
mean, if we're at the 500, probably a half hour ago.
So.
Sorry.
No, I'm joking, but I mean,
But I'm just saying, if you want to be able to have that conversation beforehand, if you think it's helpful.
I mean,
You should
I don't
replenish.
mind, you send me an email or just, I mean, look, if we're just gonna do some correspondence, but if we're gonna get into heavy duty, looking at anything before you resubmit, I would like,
Yes.
a little bit.
Well, the two things that I see that we would want to look at is access,
Yep.
which we can keep
Well,
you in the
have to
loop.
Coordinate with the state, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
we'll
fine.
keep you in the loop and do the state. And the drainage, I mean, that could be a deal killer. You had mentioned something about an easement. There's no way a neighbor is gonna give us an easement. It probably just isn't gonna happen.
Well, then,
If you
so
can hold
design
on
it-
site, if you can hold the
Yeah.
100-year on site, that's all that you need to do.
I just, it's, part of this is me, because I've, again, been putting up political campaign signs for 20 years in that front, the soil is, I could take a hammer
It's
and a
good-
screwdriver and go, and still have a hard time getting it in. I didn't realize the back had better permeable soils,
Yep.
because I've never tried back there. Everybody tries to
Nobody's gonna see
conquer
it.
that
Sign
political
back there.
area right there in front, believe me, because it's very obvious.
Big
So
willow
you have to
tree.
deal
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, add plants that are also, that will take up water,
Yeah.
tupelos, things like that. I mean, there's
I
ways
mean,
to
we've
work
just
on
seen plans where people have pipes that stop at a property line, and we say, no, you can't have
Yeah,
that
we
without
won't
the
have
easement.
that. I
So
understand.
that's why I'm saying, just be cognizant of that when you're designing your stormwater.
So what will happen, but I think it's a very important fact to talk about tonight before we do too much more. We got rid of a lot of development on the site
Mhm.
to accommodate the stormwater there, and the reason why is we're going to retain the 100-year event. It's a very big storage area there, and then it would not be a pipe, but there always is like a level spreader or a spillway to maintain existing flow patterns. So it wouldn't be a point discharge per se that's there.
Non-point, flow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is what will be submitted, and if that is a problem, then yeah, we definitely wanna tackle that, but.
I mean, I think we'd have to talk about it. If you're saying, if you're showing us what it is now, and if it's not changing,
Yep.
you're not channelizing it.
Well, they're required to show but post-development be the same. I do want to just tell you personally, two things. One, for just a pre-app submission, this was pretty complete. I applaud your firm and how much time you spent in putting into it. Also, Mr. Sotero alluded to Quick Check coming here. Do you know what Quick Check is?
Yeah.
So our code requires for, parking to be behind the rear. They looked at several other sites. This site, when they saw it, they got excited because They thought, hey, we can put the building up front and really have the parking in the rear and the pumps in the rear, like it's required in the code. And because it's on a corner at the particular angle that it's at, everyone would know, they'd see those pumps first anyway. But DEC, I believe it was DEC, there's a separation of the stormwater space, the stormwater where you wait with your car, while filling it, versus the stormwater from the land. They require a distance. There wasn't quite enough room, and so they tried to buy from that neighbor right there about that much land. And I won't even tell you what the cost was, because it killed the deal immediately. So if you have to get a drainage easement, it's not going to be cheap, I can tell you right now.
Yeah, we won't do the project if it's that.
Yeah.
The reason why we picked this and we put that down there is because gas stations have hotspot regulations.
They do.
So they have a little bit more stormwater. That project, we did actually get the plans for it.
Oh, you did?
It was incredible, impervious compared to what we've got. We've got a very small project. So
Yeah,
we
well,
feel comfortable with that aspect.
Quick Check wanted to have like 16 dispensers, filling dispensers or something huge there.
Yeah.
So that's their business model, is to have a lot and to provide, they make their money not off the gas sales, they all make their money now off the interior of the building sales. So, and we actually sort of encourage that they look at this site because it's a high traffic site. So it's a great site for what you're proposing in terms of retail use. And there's actually, I thought at first it was gonna be a drugstore because there's not a drugstore in this area. But there's also, I'm aware of the kinds of foods that Dollar General provide, or Vins, and there's actually there's not a lot of those businesses in this area either, so I have a feeling you probably do really well there, being
Well,
honest.
They would be servicing, I think, the people in the Poughkeepsie area.
Poughkeepsie, as well as off Dorsey. I mean,
Yeah.
there's dense neighborhoods all around you right in through there, and there's kind of a dearth of retail sales like this, so,
Is this model anywhere else that the board could take a look at in person?
no.
We created it.
Wow.
This is definitely unique. This would actually have to be stick-built even. Most of them are metal
We have to
frame
go to
phones.
them and tell them, they'll have to make a prototype for us, basically.
Wow.
You did a beautiful job.
Well,
Thank you.
let's hope we can cross the finish
Continue
line.
on, yes. We look forward
So,
to,
thank
I look
you.
forward to seeing you again or hearing
Quick
from you.
note on that you do have a SHPO sign-off. When you do your submittal, if you can provide, as part of your submittal, whatever it was you submitted to SHPO, so that the planning board has it for the record, since they're the lead agency.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Thank you,
Thank you
Liz.
so very much.
It's a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
And have a safe flight back down. And a safe drive back to Albany. At least it's cold, but it's not snowing tonight.
Right?
The last item on or the penultimate item on our agenda is a site plan waiver for RAMSEY and Johnson. The house is located at 9 Garden Street. This is not visible from either the historic sites or the river. And we have the zoning administrator's recommendation. Who has this file?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Pickett.
Harold Ramsey and Denise Johnson, 9 Garden Street, site plan waiver. Date, March 6, 2019, resolution 2019-09. Whereas a request for site plan waiver has been made to the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board by Harold Ramsey and Denise Johnson for the replacement of 22 windows on the existing single-family home. And whereas, therefore be it resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives site plan requirements for the proposed changes as described in the request for a waiver of site plan received by the Planning Department on February 22nd, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody else?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Wow, we both did.
All I heard was silence. And last, just a topic real quickly, we have new zoning referred to us, proposed new
Yes.
zoning for the town center.
I'm still wading through that.
It's a lengthy review,
Yes.
and I expect that there may be some changes to it based on public input. But if you guys could get your comments back to me, I'll stitch them together into one little thing, letter to give off, and I'll have it all sent to you beforehand. I believe we have 30 days in which to respond.
Yep.
How long?
30
30
days?
days.
30.
Oh, 30.
So whenever you get them to me.
I'm impressed at like the level of detail.
This is form-based on steroids. Well, so part of it is that in form-based tells you what the structure looks like. This, which is smart form-based zoning, is that what it's called? Smart, is that?
It's the smart code.
Smart code. This now gives you a relationship of buildings to one
It
another.
makes you
and
look
to the
around
streetscape.
where you are.
Yes, yes. And I think this is a huge step forward for the town, particularly in this center part where we've been focusing so much time and attention, and we have the proposed sewer moving forward. So at any rate, just as soon as you can, get me your comments.
Yes, and thanks to you and Ms. Weiser for your,
It's a bit long slogging
Yeah,
through,
yeah.
and mostly looking through a lot of buildings to try to pick out appropriate forms for the area.
nice.
This was similar to what happened in Saratoga. Did
Mhm.
I hear that correctly?
Mhm.
Am I in the
Okay,
meeting?
okay.
Because, like many folks, I was pre-now and post-now, and, oh my God, what a difference.
So, and if you'll notice, it does allow us to waive, if there's no sewer, we can waive some of the requirements,
Right.
because a lot of this is based on the idea that sewer will
There's gonna
happen.
be sewer.
Because you can't, I mean, you can have 25 houses per acre, or dwelling units, I should say, which that can't be sustained without commercial
Sewer,
sewerage.
yep.
But part of this also is the more users you have in your commercial sewer system, the cheaper it gets for everybody as well, because
Right,
you're all
right.
sharing more.
Right.
So that's also part of it is, and also we want more people living in the center of our town.
Absolutely.
Than we do in the outskirts, because it's cheaper to provide service, not all, but it's cheaper to
Yep.
provide services, and both younger
They were
and
sent March 1st?
senior types like myself tend to like being where you can walk to everything.
Yep.
So, anyway,
Well, thank you for that.
that's all. We're adjourned. Thank you.
So move? Agree?
Second?
All in
Okay.
favor, aye.
Aye.
That's what all the towns.